Welcome into SEC Primetime Live here on the Voice of College Football. Andrew Miller joined by Tucker Harlan here on a Wednesday night. Back after a little hiatus from a week ago. Couldn't get the schedules online, but that's okay. We're back to talk about SEC football. And obviously we have a slate of games to talk about that is college football. That's kind of the extent of about the slate we have to talk about later tonight. Which, hey, every time we say that, the games end up being a lot more exciting and fun. So maybe this can be a really fun weekend of football within the SEC. We're hoping for that for sure. But, man, right now, all of the hot news is around the coaching carousel in this sport, and especially in the SEC, where, Tucker, it just keeps getting crazier and crazier.
Yeah, you had another one this weekend at Auburn, and we all saw this one coming from a mile away. If Auburn did not at least win its first couple games in SEC play, you felt like things could downward spiral very quickly for them, and that's been the case this year. I would have to go back and count them all up, but the amount of one-score losses that Auburn has suffered under Hugh Freeze or had suffered under Hugh Freeze, it built up after a while, and it caught up to him in his house that he lives in that was built in the 1900s, apparently.
Yes.
So, yeah, it's been a bit of a rough week for them down there on the plains, but there could be more happening, and of course we've already seen 3 SEC jobs open up, so it's getting busy out there in a hurry.
For sure. What's up to you, Jackson? Glad to have you here in the chat. It's going to be a really fun cycle. I know some of the industry experts are talking about, we could be talking about 40 job openings this year across college football, if not more, because it's not even, of course, just the jobs that are currently open and are going to open with firings. It's all the poachings that are going to happen, because that's become more and more of the trend. Is you don't really see the coordinator hires as much anymore. It's very much, we got to go get a guy who's been a head coach. And there's going to be a lot of movement in the sport. There's going to be a lot of movement in the SEC. 4 job openings already in the conference between LSU, Florida, Auburn, and Arkansas. You have 3 jobs there in the SEC between outside of Arkansas that are top half jobs in the conference, like top 15 caliber jobs nationally, at least top 20. Going to be a really, really fun cycle to pay attention to. And we're going to have some fun with that today, because we want to play a little matchmaker. We want to figure out who's going to fill these jobs. We're not going to do the job rankings thing. I know that's been done pretty heavily, which, frankly, predicting who's going to land in these jobs has also been done pretty heavily at this point, but we're going to try our hand at that. But first, we have to set the scene for the SEC as a whole. And yes, we have the 4 jobs open currently, but there could be more movement within this conference. You've got a couple other coaches that are on the hot seat, some that, if not for a buyout, may be gone already. So there's always the chance of a few openings there. As we've seen a lot of these buyouts, schools are just saying, we're going to pay it and go forward. You have some coaches in this conference that are going to be attractive candidates at other jobs. So if they move, who goes and replaces them? So let's start there. We know the 4 openings we have. Do you see a job in this conference that you think is prime? I fully expect that's going to open up at the end of the year. We'll start with coaches that you think could get fired.
Yeah, so there's really only 2 coaches I think left that could get fired at this point, and those are Mark Stoops, as many of us thought going into the season, and then Shane Beamer, just the way things have slid out of control this season. Now, if it's just my opinion, I don't really think he gets fired. I think, if anything, he would get poached before he got fired. But I think, too, to consider with these potential openings, and speaking of Jackson, I mentioned this on his show, but do we think it gets to a point with some of these SEC schools that are growing a little bit tired of their head coaches? Not that there are many of them left, but you just say, you know what? There are so many job openings out there, and there is not enough, good coaching talent available. There's not a good coaching talent pool to pull from and, find an apt replacement. So we're just going to wait out until next year and see if, maybe we can find somebody better in the next cycle. Just like with quarterbacks in the draft, say you're a little too far down in the NFL draft, all the good quarterbacks are gone. And then maybe you just say, hey, we'll just bridge year this year, maybe go win 6-7 games, maybe less than that. And then just wait it out and get another guy the next year. So that I don't know if that is a true possibility at this point, but it would not surprise me if some of these schools, Kentucky in particular, decided to do that.
you talk about skipping on a quarterback. You're telling me my Saints didn't have to take Tyler Shuck. They could have just filled another position of need and waited another year. That's a novel concept right there.
Yeah.
No, you're right. That is something to watch for, is a job like Kentucky, where at this point, I know we just mentioned buyouts not really being prohibitive anymore because schools just want to pay them. But knowing that Kentucky is spending $22 million on a basketball roster right now, like, how much do you want to pay the buyout that Stoops currently has when you know the job market you're getting into? You know, I do push back a little bit on this idea that there's not a good candidate pool. I think there's a really good candidate pool. I think there's a lot of coaches who, if they got the opportunity, would be awesome. But I think, to your point, there's not a lot of the proven names that, to be honest, if you're an SEC fan base, we know how SEC fans and especially boosters think. There's certain accolades that, well, this coach has to have done X, Y, and Z for me to think he's worthy of coming and taking this job. And that's where, it's kind of limited on the options to be able to go after. And for a job like a Kentucky or a South Carolina, for that matter, where, look, Beamer did have a good season just 1 year ago, even though it's fallen apart here. Would you want to make that move right now when you're immediately falling to the end of the line, I would say, within the SEC in terms of job openings for either of those? Arkansas, I would take as ahead of both of those jobs right now, probably. I know Kentucky, it was kind of the hipster thing to say for a while that, oh, that's the best job in college football because of the job security versus the expectations and the resources. I think that's changing moving forward now because you no longer are in the SEC East. Obviously, Kentucky in the NIL era, the commitment they're going to have to basketball. And then, of course, with Stoops, because of the contract they gave him and because of the expectations he created, the next coach is going to have higher expectations. And I don't think the next coach is going to get the same security that Stoops did. So that's kind of my long-winded way of saying I don't think Kentucky is as sexy a job as I think some of people in college football media like to portray it to be. Because, again, that was a fun thing to say for several years, and that's the best gig in the sport. You might want to hold off another year if you're Kentucky or if you're South Carolina. But, again, as you mentioned, Beamer is someone that is Virginia Tech going to be interested. I'm going to say that I think those jobs I think those jobs stay filled for now. I don't think Kentucky makes a move, and I don't think South Carolina fires him, and I also don't think Virginia Tech's going to happen. There's a lot of smoke that the Hokies are really going all in on James Franklin, and that's kind of getting back to him in his comfort zone in the Mid-Atlantic region. It sounds like they're going to have a lot of support behind him. I think you're going to see him announced as the next coach there, which I think will keep Beamer in Columbia for at least another year. I mean, I don't know. Did you give a final on either of those? Do you think either of those open up?
I don't think Kentucky opens up. I would lean no there, and same thing with South Carolina for now, because I think the big thing with South Carolina, and we'll see what happens in the offseason, but Shane Beamer, for whatever reason, is terrible at hiring offensive coordinators, and it has led to a handful of disastrous offensive seasons. I know they ended up having a better end to the year in 22, but that's because they got rid of Marcus Satterfield before they played Tennessee and promoted Freddie Kitchens from within. Because Loggins was nothing spectacular either there. From what I remember, he
was fine. It was very basic. Beamer's insistence on being a pro-style program at South Carolina, in terms of what they try to do from an offensive identity standpoint, especially when, I don't know, he's not been the quarterback every year. I think, Spencer Rattler, I think, actually could handle some of that stuff. Lenore Sellers, man, that guy needs to be in like a Gus Malzahn offense.
Yeah.
Like it needs to be gimmicky. It needs to be heavy quarterback run. And they try to make him something that it's not. So that's definitely something Beamer's going to have to change this offseason he's going to have to find a new OC, obviously, because you fired Shula. But that'll be something to watch there for sure. Yeah, I don't think either of those jobs open up. I know coming into the year, Brent Venables, Oklahoma, was on the hot seat. I think he's done enough this year that he's going to be okay. And I think they're going to close the year pretty strong as well with a couple of the games they have there on the schedule. Everyone else that could potentially open up, it feels like it's hot commodity names, whether it be a Lane Kiffin at an Ole Miss, Eli Drinkwitz at Missouri. I know Clark Lee, Penn State's come up a little bit there. Could that be a possibility for him? And I don't think the Sark to the NFL thing is going to happen, but I know that's been put out there. Let's go ahead and start filling these jobs. And if we choose any of those guys I mentioned for one of these open SEC jobs, well, then we'll go and we'll say who we think could step into that new role. we'll start off at the top. What I think most people would consider the best job available, although it depends on how you view the governor's involvement in it all. The LSU Tigers. Big time resources, obviously ton of talent there in your backyard in Baton Rouge. They're going to have money for towards it. It's a place where very mediocre coaches have won national championships, and it's just a very unique job that should be super appealing. Who do you think becomes the next head coach of the LSU Tigers?
I think you started us off with the most difficult one because I actually am having a very hard time with this one because the obvious candidate that has been floated around out there time and time again is John Summerall, but they don't like to hire from within the state of Louisiana. So you wouldn't think he'll end up with that job. People keep pointing at Oxford, Mississippi as if it is someplace that you are going to steal a coach from. I don't think that happens. I think Lane is comfortable where he is right now, and I don't know why he'd want to leave Oxford right now. So I don't think they're going to be able to lure him down there. I don't really think Drinkwitz goes down there either. Definitely don't see James Franklin down there at all. I think one name, and I'm not sure if they floated it around down there much at all at LSU, but I feel like Alex Golish could be a guy that ends up down there. He's got a fun offense. Now, granted, they're going to have to step it up on the defensive end with him. I don't know what exactly USF has done on the defensive end this year, but none of those group of 5 schools are particularly good on that side of the ball. But I think, you could bring a spectacular offense down there. He'd be a good fit. He's far down the list, but I know Josh Heupel has been thrown around there. The national media pundits are trying to make it sound like Tennessee is ungrateful when in fact it's only like 2 people. So the national media pundits are once again putting words in our mouths that we did not say. So no, I don't think he ends up down there. And again, the politics, literal politics involved in that situation make it so difficult to name a guy that would want to come down there and do that job because you just have all this stuff going on. There's not an acting AD right now, which of course
there is now. They just made that hire.
Well, no.
Oh no, they hired the president, I guess.
Or they hired a president, but they have an acting AD, but he's not a full-time AD. So,
okay.
At least to my knowledge. But we will see what happens down there at LSU. I'm very intrigued to see who ends up with that job because I think some of the other ones have more obvious fits than that one.
So you talked about Lane because that's, of course, going to be the first name that comes up for pretty much every one of these big jobs. And we'll talk about Florida here in a sec. I think Florida versus Ole Miss, that's one where I can see the debate a lot more as to which one, like in this day and age, is Florida that much better of a job? I still think it's a better job, but I don't think it's a big enough step up that Lane would necessarily make the move. I had thought LSU would be one that if that opened, he's going for it because I feel like that's one of those jobs you couldn't pass up. And I do still think, I do think that job has pretty significant advantages over Ole Miss. However, we just talked about a lot of the dysfunction there and the inner workings with the governor and all of that. Lane is not a coach who wants to deal with that stuff. And I do think the quality of life aspect will play in. And I think I think that's going to keep him in Oxford. I mean, we'll bury the lead for Florida because, I think you already said you don't think Lane's going to move on. I don't think Florida's going to get him either. But again, I would have said LSU because, one, they're going to want him. 2, that's a job that he did want previously, which I think he wanted Florida previously as well, and things change. But I think the current situation in LSU makes that an environment I don't know how many coaches want to step into, and I think Lane understands what he's got going at Ole Miss and is probably going to stick around for at least a few more years until something comes open that is just, okay, I can't ignore that situation, or he's just going to ride off into the sunset in Oxford. He might do that as well. You talked about Summerall. I agree. They're not going to hire the Tulane coach, which is a dumb mentality to take, but that's the way, again, it's politics. It literally is the way things work in states like that. A name you didn't mention that I've heard get some play that I think makes a lot of sense, and I'll go ahead and say this is who gets it. Brent Key at Georgia Tech. That's a guy who is obviously having an outstanding season. He is at his alma mater, which I get that's tough to pull guys from, but has done a really, really nice job turning Georgia Tech around. He was on Jeff Collins' staff, and became the interim and immediately turned them into a team that started winning games again. They've been really fun offensively. A lot of that is Buster Faulkner, the OC, but they've done a great job in terms of a physicality mindset, and I think that's a big thing. The thing we've heard time and time again with Brian Kelly is part of why it didn't work is his teams were soft, which Notre Dame, I would never really – I know the 2012 Alabama game, everybody remembers that national championship, and Notre Dame got run over. Most Notre Dame teams under Kelly played good defense, ran the football, had great offensive lines. That did not translate to LSU whatsoever. They have been a soft football team in the trenches, and I think they want someone who can bring that mentality. He is a very good recruiter. I don't know. Georgia Tech signed one of their better recruiting classes in school history.
They did.
The season. He's got ties, going to the state of Florida as well to be able to go get recruits. But obviously with LSU, you just recruit your backyard. That's a guy who gets players fired up to play. But that's another thing. I think LSU is one of those jobs where having a coach players love plays a big role. Les Miles, say what you will about him. Guys like to play for him, and we get fired up to play for him. Ed Orgeron, everyone wanted to play for Coach O. Brent Key, it's kind of that same way. I think he gets his guys fired up. I think he has a mentality that LSU fans want. He's going to be a relentless recruiter. He would have to nail the OC hire because I don't know if he would get – I think Faulkner could go get a job this year. So I don't know if he gets to bring him with him. But, man, I think it would work, and I think LSU's next coach will be Brent Key.
Yeah, you made a good point there with the obviously the players coach thing and then the physicality thing, because you think back to all those great teams that Les Miles had at LSU. They ran the football and they played defense. They didn't do any of the flashy stuff that you saw from Joe Burrow onward.
Yeah, they had 5-star wide receivers out wide and never gave them the football.
Now, granted, I think they would like to continue their tradition of Heisman Trophy winning quarterbacks down there at LSU that they've started since Joe Burrow. I do wonder a little bit with that offense because so much of what their success has been this year has been predicated on giving Haynes King the ball 20 times a game and letting him run. So I don't know if you're going to be able to recruit quarterbacks to do that, if that is what is part of the offense, but it could change just depending on the quarterbacks that you get. And you're right, too. Georgia Tech is doing very well on the recruiting trail this year. I know they beat out Tennessee for at least one 4-star kid earlier this year. I know there's a guy who just decommitted last week. He's only a 3-star, but he's thinking about flipping to Georgia Tech. So he's doing a very good job there. And, that's who Tennessee plays at the beginning of the season next year. So, if he were to move on there, then suddenly that Georgia Tech game becomes a little bit less of a game that you worry about if you're Tennessee, just because I think he's brought a really strong mentality down there to Bobby Dodd Stadium, which I'm glad they're playing that game there too, by the way, because they have a certain number of games they have to play in the Georgia Dome every year. And I hate that, but they're making sure they're playing it in Bobby Dodd Stadium. So good on the Georgia Tech admin for doing that.
Yeah, they moved the rivalry game with Georgia to the Mercedes-Benz, which is just insane.
It has some dumb name town. Now, what is it? I forget what it is.
It's Mercedes-Benz Stadium.
Well, no, not Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Oh. They renamed the rivalry. Some dumb sponsorship.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I couldn't tell you. Yeah,
we'll know what it is when it gets close to time to clean old fashioned hate or whatever it is they're calling it now.
It'll always just be clean old fashioned hate for real college football fans,
just like the Outback Bowl.
It's still the Outback Bowl, 100%. Also, it's the Red River Shootout. Yeah. We can say it. Okay. I think that Brent Key would be a great fit in Baton Rouge. Talk about that Florida job, and we already kind of ruled out. We don't think Lane Kiffin's there, but there is another visor-wearing coach in the SEC who loves to talk smack, that finds ways to score points, is really good on the recruiting trail, has done a great job in the NIL sphere, kind of a modern coach, has done a good job hiring assistants. I think he fits really well. It's just their fan base doesn't seem to be all that interested in the idea of hiring one Eli Drinkwitz.
I feel like the Florida fans should be saying, give me drink or give me death. Because we talked about this a couple weeks ago when I forget what job that was came open, maybe because all of these jobs have come open lately. It's either Arkansas or Florida.
I think it was Florida. I think we were talking about Florida.
Yeah, it was Florida because we mentioned this job in particular. It's like you need a guy that has a lot of energy, and Eli Drinkwitz has a lot of energy. He's had good quarterbacks at Missouri. really since Brady Cook onward. And Missouri is a place too where they develop quarterbacks very, very well. He would add to the arrogance that they carry themselves with down there at Florida. I could see that being a very good fit. Now, the last time they tried hiring another SEC coach from another SEC program, you remember this quite well. It started off well, and then recruiting tanked, and then they very quickly got mad at him and decided it was time to move on to Billy Napier. So, I don't know if that is a reservation that they have, but I feel like if Lane Kiffin is not a match made in heaven with Gainesville, Florida, Eli Drinkwitz has to be close to it out of the successful coaches in the SEC.
It makes a ton of sense. And I think Lane probably would be a match made in heaven. I don't think he's leaving.
No.
Eli to me fits the mold of a Florida coach perfectly. All of their fans seem to be completely opposed to it because they find him annoying and they haven't liked him and they haven't liked going up against him. So now they don't want to have to flip the switch and start cheering for him, which I get it. That's part of fandom is you get the people that you tend to hate. And then all of a sudden you find yourself in a situation where you need them to be on your side. But I think it makes a lot of sense. And I'm going to be honest, like I understand he's been put in a good situation at Mizzou. I think he would take the job. I really do. And I think that's my pick. I think Florida's next coach is going to be Eli Drinkwitz.
Yeah, I have that feeling too. I don't know who else you're going to be able to lure down there because James Franklin can't win the big game. You know, they'd all be upset by that. I don't know where else you look for a coach. They tried the group of 5 route with Billy Napier last time. That didn't work. And then they've tried the coordinator hires in the past. I don't know who right now at coordinator would work for them down there. I already linked Alex Golish to LSU, so I don't think he could go to Florida. But if he ended up at Florida for whatever reason, I might have to give up my Tennessee fandom just because that guy, A, found a way to win in Florida in 10 less tries than Tennessee's had over the last 22 seasons, and B, would have taken the Florida job and would have started beating Tennessee because that's just what Florida does down there in the swamp. So, I don't want that.
Oh, go ahead.
I don't want that.
Part of Florida's issue is they're not going to want to hire a G5 coach.
Yeah.
Like Summerall, I think could work there fine. Golish could work there fine for sure. But it's the whole thing of you don't want to hire what you just had, and they just hired a G5 coach who was very successful at that level, and it's like, oh man, that's not going to work out. That does mean since we both think it's going to be Drinkwitz, we're going to have to fill the Missouri job. We'll do that after these other openings. We'll see if I think these next couple of jobs. Well, Auburn, I guess, in a world could be a potential poaching. Let's get to Auburn. I've seen it thrown around that for the first time in a while, like every time Auburn opens, we talk about dysfunction. And we talk about the chaos on the plains and booster culture and all the buyout stuff there. And there's a lot of people pointing out that compared to where Florida is, with some of the stuff changing at that university, with where LSU is and all the inner workings there, Auburn is like weirdly stable at the moment. And I have my opinions on John Cohen as an AD in terms of his actual ability in a lot of things, but I wouldn't say he runs an incompetent athletic department. Stability is probably a fair way of describing what you get under Cohen. It does feel like there's some solid footing there. And because of that, they could potentially attract a really nice coach. I think I know the most obvious answer here, but let's see. I mean, are you going to go let's see if you go another direction. Who are you thinking for this job?
Because I feel like John Summerall has to end up in an SEC job. I think it's going to be him. I don't think they're going to lure anybody away from another SEC school this year. And I know that they've gone the G5 route twice in a row, but this is a guy that has been in Southern Alabama, not too far from Auburn, down at Troy, did very well at Troy, well enough to get the Tulane job, and has stabilized Tulane after Willie Fritz left. And here's the thing, man. Tulane, for however long, was a non-factor in Group of Five and college football in general. Like, they were an SEC member at one point in time. Of course, they got shuffled out of the SEC along with Georgia Tech and Sewanee and all the other rejects. But And they might have hit a bowl game like once every 10, 15 years, but they were just never a thought of any college football fan until Willie Fritz got there. Willie Fritz leaves for Houston because they're going to the Big 12. You wonder if John Summerall can keep it up down there, and he's been able to, which has been impressive. And of course, he's a guy that has a good offense down there. He's doing it with a quarterback that he got on short notice, and Jake Retzloff from BYU. So I have to think he's a pretty strong candidate for this job. Just knowing that, and then, of course, the whole politics thing at LSU will keep them from looking in New Orleans for the next head coach. And I don't see him at Florida either, but I do see him in at least one SEC job. So I will go with John Summerall to be the next head coach on the Plains.
I'm right there with you. It's too obvious. He grew up in Alabama. His wife is an Auburn alumna, and I know, how much does that matter? Well, hey, it's ties. It helps. Had so much success at Troy, taking over what had been a proud program that had really fallen off for a couple years there, and immediately steps in and had a 12-win season followed by an 11-win season. You're right. He's mostly kept it up at Tulane. There's been a little bit of a dip, but like you look at their record in conference, they're still rolling right where they were. I understand they're coming for a rough loss to UTSA. You can't take individual results and say, well, you can't hire a coach now because of that. The guy has a good reputation as a recruiter, a good reputation as a defensive mind, but he's hired good coordinators on both sides of the ball as well. Tons of SEC experience between Ole Miss and Kentucky. I think he is a match made in heaven for Auburn. Some of their fans are pushing back against it because, again, it's the whole idea of we don't want a G5 coach, we want a sitting Power 5. Also, there is a massive push, at least online, to make DJ Durkin the full-time coach there.
Yeah. I don't like that.
Y'all have fun with that if that's what you want to do. I think everyone kind of knows why DJ Durkin probably should not be coaching, but it is what it is.
Yeah, there are not many Philip Fulmers, Ryan Days, and Dabo Sweeneys out there. We'll just call it like that. You not very many interims that can assume the full-time job and stabilize it for a long period of time.
Yeah, I get the whole thing is the defense is really good and the players like him. And it's just this whole idea of, well, we got that side of the ball figured out. Let's keep that rolling and just go get it. Let him bring in an OC. But the guy shouldn't be the head coach. I mean, if Auburn, if you want to do that and it fall apart, y'all knock yourself out. I think if you hire John Summerall, you're going to have a ton of success. Which, hey, I mean, I enjoy watching Auburn lose. It's a fun team to watch fail. I'm speaking here as a Mississippi State fan, but
hey, they do say Auburn or Clemson is Auburn with a lake.
It is
two very similar schools that can be really good at something and then fail spectacularly in the postseason.
Fun fact: the Clemson campus was modeled after Mississippi State's.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's a thing. But yeah, no, Auburn with a lake is the other thing you hear there. But I think if Auburn hires John Summerall, they are going to have a lot of success there. I think he'll kill it. And like that guy is as SEC as they come, and I think he would fit in perfectly. I can't screw it up. And apparently he wants the job too. That's the other thing. Is like he's interested in the job. Go make it happen, Auburn. Last current opening, and obviously we still have to talk about Missouri as well. Arkansas. Now, there's some rumblings last few days. They're making a big push for James Franklin. I don't think they're going to be able to get that done. But interesting job where it's the money is the big question because we know Arkansas has very, very rich boosters. We also know that those boosters have spent a lot on basketball. They spend a lot on baseball, which is not the same for a lot of these other – I mean, across the SEC, it's very much true. But compared to some of these other openings, Arkansas is putting a lot more into baseball than some of those other jobs. And I think there's also a thing I've heard that, like, while, yes, they have the rich boosters, they don't necessarily always put that money into athletics. So that's a whole thing. You don't have the greatest local recruiting base. It's been a job that for the past 15 years has struggled a lot. There's challenges there for sure. But we've seen people turn. We've seen Ole Miss get turned around. We've seen Missouri get turned around. I think it's very clear a lot of those SEC jobs that had been in the bottom half, if you get the money in line, you can have success and find a way to win. Who do you think Arkansas can turn to, and who do you think fits for this job?
This is the other one that I'm having a hard time with because you have this is a strange situation where you have an interim coach in Bobby Petrino who is the last truly successful head coach at your school. Now, they're not winning a ton of games right now, as we know. They've, in fact, lost 7 straight. Going to need to pick it up if you really want to secure that job, or at least just find some guys on the defensive end and then roll with it. And then you're right about the money. Hunter Yurachek point blank said, we're not in a place right now where we can be competitive for an SEC championship. We can't compete for them. So, yeah, I think the other big candidate for that job was Rhett Lashley, and he, of course, signed an extension at SMU, so that ain't happening. I feel like you have to go out of the conference at this point. You can't rehire Brett Bielema. I guess because Franklin is out there, and you're right. James Franklin is a guy that I could see them taking a look at just because of his track record, unless he in fact takes that Virginia Tech job. Man, this is a hard one. This is a really, really hard one because you're getting to the point where, and I didn't necessarily mean the coaching talent pool was bad, but like there are so many job openings that so many people are looking for coaches that just not everybody is going to find a good coach in this cycle, which I think is a real problem for some of these teams that are looking for coaches. Who is the Texas State coach? Is it GJ Ken? Is that a name that they could potentially float around?
GJ Kinney.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's tied directly to Arkansas. He is someone that has come up before. He's having a rough year. He is someone he's one of those coaches I've paid close attention to. I think he's a really good coach, very bright offensive mind, and overall has done a really good job at Texas State. Now's a rough year to make it happen. The other name that would have been tied there was Jeff Traylor at UTSA, but kind of some of the shine is off there because the last couple seasons they faded a little. Basically, they had Frank Harris, who was that awesome quarterback, and since he's been gone, they've kind of just been a 500 type team.
Yeah.
He was previously on staff at Arkansas under Chad Morris, but was on staff there.
And that's the other important thing that we got to mention too with those types hires, because the last time you got a coach out of the American that was supposed to be a good offensive mind and was coming off a disappointing season, it was Chad Morris. So that is the one route you don't want to go down. My question is, how long does Kenny Dillingham stay at Arizona State? Because he's doing it without a quarterback right now, and he just won last week. They're going to a bowl at the very least. And you got to, because he inherited a program that was on a postseason ban, and within 2 years had them in a college football playoff. So you have to think his name comes up at some point, right?
That's another alma mater situation, and I know I took Brent Key from his alma mater in LSU, but it's Georgia Tech to LSU. Arizona State's actually set up pretty well right now. From what I've heard and read, it's going to take a lot to get him to leave. He's been at Auburn before, so that could be a possibility there. I know there's some Auburn fans pushing his name. If Florida State opens up, he was at Florida State previously. I don't see him leaving for like an Arkansas though. You mentioned the point about the G5 coaches from the American, and you're right. A name that has come up some. Apparently, PJ Fleck is someone they're looking at from Minnesota. Row the boat. I think he's a good coach. I think he'd have success. I don't know if they go that direction, and also don't know if that's a job that Fleck would necessarily leave for.
That's like a Brett Bielema type hire, It
is.
Because it's, again, very Big Ten football. I know I'm stereotyping a little bit here, but, you're looking at running backs that go for well over 1,500 yards in a season just every single year, and that's the kind of style of football they play up there. Would you really want to try bringing that back down? This is the problem I have with this opening, is like so many of these potential names out there would just be retrying things that have already failed at Arkansas.
That's why I do think it's going to be an up-and-comer that scores points. Arkansas is a school where offense has always been what they've been interested in.
No.
Like Houston Nutt over the years had some really high-flying offenses. Obviously, Bobby Petrino was as a head coach and as a coordinator and interim coach. Sam Pittman with the hire of Kendall Briles, what they were able to do offensively during that time. Like that is a school where scoring is sort of the thing that works for them. Heck, Bielema, when he was there, their best couple of years happened when Dan Enos, of all people, had a good offense for a few seasons, and they were making that thing click. You got to score points to be successful in Arkansas. This is where I think Alex Golesh lands. I think it's Golesh or Eric Morris, one of the two. I'll go with Golesh just because we talked about the Chad Morris of it all. I know it's a different school, but hiring a coach from North Texas, which I mean regionally North Texas, because you had SMU and then Denton with North Texas, who scores a lot of points. Might rub some of them the wrong way. Golish, I mean, obviously you've talked a lot about him, and we know the guy will find ways to score points. He'll put an exciting product on the field. You asked about the defense earlier. They've been better this year. Like, it's not a good defense, but it's opportunistic and one that can create some havoc plays. It did bite them. They blew a big lead against Memphis, like in their last game. But other than that, they've actually been good enough on that side of the ball. I think it'd be an exciting brand of football. He's someone that has really well respected as like a leader and guys players want to get hyped up for. I think he'd fit perfectly at Arkansas.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that would be a good one. They need offense out there. You're right about it, but they also love their running backs too, and Darren McFadden, and they've had several over the years, like Raleigh Williams, Alex Collins, rest in peace. A lot of really good running backs coming through there too. So that's one way I could see them potentially getting that PJ Fleck hire, like you mentioned. But I feel like that would be a little bit of a stretch to try and bring him down from Minnesota, where he is in a very stable spot.
Well, as you know, that offense that Golish runs, a running back can thrive.
Yeah.
And put up huge numbers. And they did it with Kendall Briles. Kendall Briles, obviously, he is a Briles. He is off that tree. And they did it in the run game primarily. So I think he'd fit in really well there. Well, last one here, because we talked about Missouri. We think that one can open up because we both took Drinkwitz going to Florida. I'll just go ahead and put mine out there. I could see Missouri being a situation where they want to keep this thing rolling as much as possible. We've got a good foundation in place. Let's keep someone who would know it well. I don't think they would be ready to promote Kirby Moore as for the OC to head coach, but I think they would go back and get someone who was on staff who's doing an outstanding job this year. I'm actually going to predict a coordinator getting a job, Blake Baker, who's currently the DC at LSU. He was DC at Missouri for a couple of years, had a really good run. Obviously, he's been outstanding at LSU since getting there. That defense has been really good this season. And obviously, LSU, I think, new coach coming in, probably going to be looking for a key. Baker, I can't talk, is going to be looking for a new job. I think Mizzou makes sense there.
Yeah, I think that's a good hire. Because with those defensive guys and coordinators in particular, you got to get them while their stock is high. Why do you think Derek Mason made his way to Vanderbilt? And why do you think Tim Banks is not leaving for a head coaching job from Tennessee anytime soon? He left before, or he stayed long enough to where his stock cooled down a little bit. So I think that would be a good decision. And Kirby Moore, I don't think he would be quite ready for it yet, although his brother is doing just fine making his way into NFL coaching. Just needs some better talent down there for your New Orleans Saints. But if they were to bring in somebody from outside, I would say probably Eric Morris, like you mentioned, from North Texas. One thing we know about Missouri is that when they are at their best, they have a tremendous quarterback and a tremendous offense. It's been the case since they were in the Big 12 with guys like Blaine Gabbert, and then, of course, coming into the SEC with James Franklin, Drew Lock, Brady Cook in the last couple years with Eli Drinkwitz. So, I think you're right about sustaining what they got. I think that would be a more appropriate move. But if you were to bring in an outsider, I think that's a good candidate.
And they would attract some good coaches as well. I mean, someone who we haven't talked about that. I know he's come up for Arkansas, and I think he would make a lot of sense there as well. Ryan Silverfield at Memphis.
Yeah.
And regionally, that's kind of a hire that would fit in there. He's doing a really good job with that program. Although track record on Memphis coaches has not been great lately. So we'd have to see how that would go. But I do think he would make quite a bit of sense. That'll do it for the coaching carousel talk. Let's get into this slate of games. And look, for week 11, it's not the prettiest. We do have we have one ranked matchup. We have a couple others that, hey, most of these spreads within a touchdown could be interesting enough. Obviously, we're not going to spend time talking about the Citadel against Ole Miss.
They did tie Alabama at halftime one year. And they did beat South Carolina once.
They did. They did beat South Carolina. What was
Be careful, Ole Miss.
Yeah, you better take them seriously, Rebels, or not. I mean, I'd love to laugh at that, but no, Ole Miss is going to win that game with eyes closed. But we'll get in. We'll run through the slate mostly in order. We'll save Texas A&M Missouri is going to be our game of the week, so we'll save that for the end. We'll start off in Starkville. Number 5, Georgia going on the road against Mississippi State. The Mississippi State Bulldogs coming off a win, finally getting an SEC win for the first time since 2023, snapping a 16-game conference losing streak. That was against Arkansas in a game that they were pretty lucky to get the win when it's all said and done. Georgia obviously holds on to get the win of the cocktail party against Florida. The Athens-based Bulldogs favored by 8.5, over under 56.5. What thoughts do you have on this matchup?
For one, I think State covers. Georgia has been playing with fire and its food all season, pretty much. That's a team that should be blowing out a lot of the teams that they've gone against this year, like Auburn, for example. I'm surprised they didn't pull away down there. I know things get weird for them at Jordan-Hare at times, but you figure they could, win that game by a little bit more. Same thing with Florida, even though that's a rivalry game. Ole Miss, I figured they'd at least win by double digits at home, but Ole Miss came in there and started off hot offensively. But Georgia, like it did at Tennessee, decided to turn on the heat on defense and ended up getting that one done. I feel like you're probably looking at a similar type game here. I think Mississippi State can hang around in this game just because they'll be able to do some things on offense in the early going, but I do think that Georgia defense will eventually lock in because that's just what it tends to do, as we've noticed here. I think you're going to see a lot of points, but I do think the Athens-based Bulldogs get the win in Stark Vegas.
Yeah, kind of the theme with Georgia this year has been getting down early and then second half dominance. It's sort of like this year, Kirby, they very much feel out what you're going to do offensively. All right, let's see what the script is, and then we'll go and adjust from there. And I could definitely see it playing out similarly. I will say Mississippi State's run defense has kind of gotten a little bit more iffy by the week. And Georgia, when they are able to just line up and run the football, they're kind of hard to slow down. I think you probably see a lot of that from Georgia. Heavy dose of the run game. Probably try to speed this game up and kill as much clock as possible because State is more of that quick strike on offense with the big plays downfield, which they're going to have a chance in this game. I don't think State's going to be able to run it on them really at all. It might be kind of similar, like, your volunteers taking the shots down the field. Can you find those plays in the passing game? That's going to be kind of your best hope of staying in this. I don't trust State to be able to do it consistently enough. Also think that the matchup in the red zone, Georgia's been really good at finishing drives, turning them into touchdowns. They also do a pretty good job of holding in the red zone. I think it's going to be tough for Mississippi State to deal with. So I actually think Georgia probably covers. I don't think it's going to be a blowout. I think it'll probably kind of be a game that they mostly control that maybe is interesting for a half or so, but probably around a 10-point game. But yeah, I'll take Georgia to get the win in Starkville. Sorry, scrolling down my document. Auburn, first game post Hugh Freeze, going on the road to take on Vanderbilt. That game, 3 o'clock Central Time on the SEC Network. Vanderbilt is a 6.5-point favorite, over under 45.5. Feel like we're not going to get a lot of points in this game.
Yeah, I think Vegas nailed the spread here. I do think Auburn is going to be motivated with that interim bump, so I think that's something that will keep this game close. But you're right. I don't think there's going to be a ton of points. Vandy just not a team that really wants to score a ton of points. But Vandy is also very motivated after a gut-wrenching loss at Texas where they couldn't cover the onside kick. So at home, and they gotta hold serve at home the rest of the way and find a way to get a win at Tennessee. And I don't see them losing either of those last 2 home games. So I'll take them to win. I don't think there's going to be a ton of points. I'm not sure about the cover, though. 6.5 is right there. I think Auburn could cover that, but it's going to be close. It's going to be really close.
I said this talking about, I think it was Auburn, Missouri a couple weeks ago, that Auburn's chance comes down to whether or not, at the time, Jackson Arnold can finally hit Cam Coleman down the field. And obviously now it's Ashton Daniels stepping in the quarterback. It's the same thing. I think if Auburn can have some success in the pass game, they'll win this football game. Vanderbilt's secondary has been a little bit vulnerable at times this year. Obviously, Arch just came off having a huge day against them in that game against Texas. We saw Alabama have success throwing it against him. LSU was able to have some. If Auburn had a competent passing attack, I think they would be able to move the ball and have success. I still don't trust Auburn to do that, even with Hugh Freeze no longer running the show. I think Auburn's defense will do fine and will probably do enough for Auburn to be able to potentially win, but I just don't trust the Auburn offense yet. But I agree. I think probably a Vanderbilt win, but I think Auburn can cover that 6.5-point spread. Next game on the docket, LSU at number 4 Alabama. This was supposed to be a game that we would have spent a ton of time on, but it's just not that interesting right now. 6:30 p.m. Central Time on ABC. Alabama 10.5-point favorite, over under 49.5. Any chance LSU makes this thing interesting coming off a bye with an interim coach?
I would say yes. They are always up for this game, no matter where the location is, it seems like. And I feel like if there is going to be a blowout in this game, just based on recent trends, it's going to be in Baton Rouge. But the game's in Tuscaloosa this time around. Like, we saw that team with Ed Orgeron in 2021 that was, at the time, I would say one of the worst LSU football teams I've ever seen, just because their heads weren't in it really at all at that point in the year. But they only lost the game 20-14. They were strangely competitive with the Tide in Tuscaloosa. So I can't really get a feel for how many points will be scored in this game. I would say it's probably somewhere in the middle. I don't think it's high scoring, but Alabama will get somewhere into the high 20s. If I had to guess, it feels like a 28-21 type game. If LSU can find its way into the 20s after what's been a pretty rough year on offense. But no, I think LSU will play the game for sure. And they'll show up, maybe have some motivation early, but I don't see a way Alabama loses this game.
Yeah, I do think LSU will be fired up early, and that could lead to some points early on in those scripted drives. It's a strength-on-strength matchup when you talk about the LSU pass defense against the Alabama passing offense. LSU secondary been really strong this season. Alabama, they've been one of the better passing teams in the country. And I think, whoever comes out on top between those two will kind of determine. I think Alabama still wins the game regardless, but that can determine how close this is. I will say LSU's run D has gotten a little bit more susceptible these last few weeks, and if Alabama can get the run game going, I think just LSU's not going to have a chance to keep up. The other thing here, the other side of the ball, Bama's pass rush has gotten better as the season has gone along, and LSU's offensive line has just been such a train wreck. I think, again, LSU will find a way to keep this maybe respectable, but I think Bama wins and probably finds a way to cover that number. I just think they're the much better team here and will be able to handle business at home. You are right, though. This game has been closer in Tuscaloosa than it is in Baton Rouge, which is opposite of what anyone would expect for whatever reason. Last game before we get to the game of the week, Florida at Kentucky. I guess if there's any hope of going to a bowl game for either of these teams, they've got to get the win here. I feel like this is just going to be an ugly game up in Lexington that not a lot of people are going to want to watch.
Yeah, they're trying to hide this from you on SEC Network for sure. This one's hard because I saw, granted, it was a KSR guy and a noted hater of Tennessee, so always take their words with a grain of salt. But his whole thing was just if you play at your rival close like you did with Georgia, you feel like they're going to fall apart at some point here in the next week or so. I think Kentucky does what it has with Cutter Boley. Now, part of that was playing against just a very questionable defense in Tennessee a couple weeks ago. But they did get out of Auburn with a win. Maybe motivated. Mark Stoops has returned. Florida is 100% the better team on paper, though. There's no doubt about that. And there seems to be a lot of buy-in from the Florida players. We've not seen any of them announcing they'll transfer. There's not been any decommitments really from this class that I'm aware of that Florida's got coming in. DJ Lagway seems very bought in. And if your quarterback's bought in, everybody's bought in. So I know that the Dallas Wilson injury is going to sting a little bit, but I definitely think Florida wins up at Kentucky. I had to say this, but just based on the way things go for Tennessee in the swamp, it would not surprise me at all if Florida managed to find a way to get to 7-5 this year somehow.
I will say these games played in Lexington, Kentucky tends to find ways to keep them close, and I think it will be competitive. I didn't mention the spread, 3.5 in favor of the Gators, over under of 44.5. The way I look at it is just the best all-around unit in this game is the Florida defense. That group has been pretty solid much of the year, really outside of the game against Texas A&M, which is one of the best teams in the country. They've held their own. And I think Florida's skill talent can do enough. And I know, like you mentioned, the receiver situation could be down a couple guys. What are you going on there? But Jaden Ball has gotten better and better as the season has gone along. And I do think Kentucky's defense has been at its best when they've just been able to, and I know this is obvious, just dominate up front and get a lot of pressure on quarterbacks. They've only done it a couple of times, basically against Texas and then Auburn. Florida's offensive line's actually been fine for much of the season. I think Florida's able to do just enough offensively, and I think they can cover that 3.5-point spread. So I'll take the Gators to get the win, but I do think probably a more low-scoring game, and I do think it'll be competitive. Last game, we'll talk about the game of the week in the SEC. Have a ranked matchup, 2:30 p.m. Central Time on ABC. The number 3 Texas A&M Aggies go on the road to face number 22 Missouri. Texas A&M is a 6.5-point favorite, over under a 47.5. If Missouri wants to create chaos, this is you got to do it in this game. If Texas A&M wants to go to the playoff, they win this game, and I think they're locked in when you look at their remaining slate for the rest of the way. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, so obviously you're not optimistic about Mizzou with Matt Zollers being trotted out there as the starting quarterback. He helped them stay in the game at Vanderbilt. I don't think you feel as good about him in a game like this against a team that's played like Texas A&M has all season. It's going to be hard for them to get more than 7 or 8 wins this year. I feel like if just with what's remaining, because you don't have any non-conference cupcakes left for Cupcake Saturday and all that fun stuff. So looking at Texas A&M, man, again, this is one of the best rounded teams in all of the SEC this year. They play very well on both sides of the football. Offensively, Marcel Reed has become a much better passer than what we've seen here, at least at the beginning of his career. And you can always rely on Texas A&M to have a good defense with Mike Elko. And I waited for when is Texas A&M going to become Texas 8-4 to happen in October. It's not happening. I don't feel like it's happening this year because Mike Elko is not a coach that carries himself the way that Kevin Sumlin and Jimbo Fisher in particular did, where it's just like we're going to screw around and win a bunch of games to start the season, but ultimately let our fans down. I don't see that happening this year, and you know what it is? It's what Georgia used to do for so long, where they had a guy in Mark Richt that won 8-9 games a lot of the season, but they could never get over the hump. That's what Texas A&M had with Sumlin and Fisher. Now, I'm not saying Mike Elko is the next Kirby Smart, but I just think he's one of the best football minds, both in the country and in the SEC, first and foremost. But you look at what they've got the rest of the way, and you mentioned it. The FCS game, I forget who that's against.
Samford.
Okay, so they'll win that game. They got South Carolina at home. They're not losing that game. I think their most iffy game at this point in the season would be Texas at home, and Texas has played a lot better. But I don't know if no, that's a road game.
Yeah.
But Texas, they're playing better. But do you trust that offense? Because so much of what they're doing is based on the performance of their defense and special teams. And I think A&M could overcome them in that game. But back to this game, I think they could potentially win by double digits just because of the situation you got with Mizzou and not having a quarterback for the foreseeable future. And I'm not saying he's anything like, what's his name? Drew Pine, Matt Zollers. Drew Pine's one of the worst SEC quarterbacks we've seen in recent memory, right up there with the Peterman. But I don't think they're going to be able to do it against Texas A&M. I think that team is too good right now and is playing the best out of everybody in the SEC. So give me the Aggies by double digits.
Yeah, Elko has this thing rolling, and I think this matchup is just favorable for them on both sides of the ball. Breaking it down a little bit here. So you talk about the A&M offense against the Missouri defense. The strength for Mizzou has been the pass rush. They've been averaging 2.9 sacks a game. Damon Willis and Zion Young off the edge. They've got some really good pass rushers able to get after the quarterback. And obviously when you have that, it gives you a chance in a lot of games. A&M has probably one of the best offensive lines in the country. They do not give up a lot of pressure to begin with. Marcel Reed is obviously a guy who can extend plays and negate some of that to begin with. So I don't think – I think it's going to be neutralized a little bit. I think Missouri probably will not have the same edge that they would typically have. And then the other thing with Missouri, when you look at that defense, is the last 3 games, they have given up 157 rush yards per game at 4.7 yards per carry when you adjust for sacks. Now, for Vanderbilt specifically, Vanderbilt was very much skewed by like an 80-yard touchdown run. Other than that, Vandy did not run the ball very well against Missouri. But Alabama and Auburn, if you take away the sacks, ran the ball pretty effectively against Mizzou. Well, I just talked about, like, A&M, that offensive line is great, and that run game is dominant. So, like, I think A&M will probably be able to control the line of scrimmage on that side of the ball and be able to do enough offensively on the road, even against a Mizzou defense that's pretty good. And then the other side of the ball, when you look at the A&M defense against Missouri, you already talked about it. You know, Matt Zollers coming in at quarterback. You know, I know he was a highly rated player coming out of high school, and he did some nice things in the game against Vanderbilt. He does not offer the same run threat as Perbula, and I don't know if he's going to step in and suddenly be an upgrade in the passing game. And that's the other thing is Missouri's pass game fell off to begin with once they hit conference play. Like, I know everyone was doing the whole thing, would Penn State be better off with Bo Perbula right now? And I think once Perbula started playing SEC defenses, we kind of found out, okay, probably not. Like, he's really not been that spectacular. And again, he's not playing in this game. Do I think Zollers is going to step in and be a better passer than he was? I kind of have my doubts about that. So you talk about Mizzou already has to lean on Ahmad Hardy, who's outstanding. But it's tougher to get that success running the ball when they don't respect your passing game whatsoever. And like I said, Zollers is not the same run threat, so that makes it even more difficult. Only 2 teams have run on Texas A&M a lot. Those are Notre Dame and Arkansas. Those are both teams that they had to respect through the air. Like the quarterback for Notre Dame, I don't know why I'm blanking on his name right now.
C.J. Carr.
Carr, yes. And then obviously Taylor Green for Arkansas. Those are guys that can light you up through the air. When you have to worry about that passing threat, it makes it harder to deal with the run as well. These other games A&M has played, they have absolutely shut down the run in SEC play. And I don't know if they're going to shut it down, but I think they'll be able to limit Missouri quite a bit. And last thing I'll add, Missouri has seen like one really good pass rush, which was Auburn. Auburn had 3 sacks and 5 quarterback hurries in that game. Texas A&M gets 4 sacks a game on the season. I think this game favors the Aggies quite a bit. I think they will be able to go and handle business here and get the win. The line is 6.5. I think they absolutely cover that on the road in Como. Look, I know we were hyping up Eli Drinkwitz a second ago for the Florida job, and I do think he's a really good coach. I don't put this as a reflection on him. I think the Aggies are going to have their way with the Tigers in Columbia.
Yeah, I think it's inevitable at this point. It's not quite like the last time they played up there because I think that was Drinkwitz's second year, and they were not stellar that season. I know they made a bowl and lost to, I think, Army. Maybe it was a Gasparilla Bowl. It's one of those bowls before Christmas, so never a good situation to be in if you're a head coach of a team like that. But no, they're a significantly better team now, but so is Texas A&M, so I think that kind of evens out. But I still think it is a double-digit victory for Texas A&M.
Yeah, so we were pretty much in lockstep when it came to most of these games throughout the day, as well as with the coach search stuff. We'll see how the weekend of games goes. Even though it's not the prettiest weekend, I'm sure we'll get some fun moments, and we'll be sure to talk about it the next time we are together. If you haven't already, please leave us a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and all that wonderful stuff. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. Thanks to Tucker for taking the time. We'll see you all later.
College football is even more exciting when you've got some action on the line, and the games are even better when you're cashing in. And the Voice of College Football is the place to be to get the greatest value. Start with my picks. 75% against the money line, 58% against the spread, and I've got a 40-plus year track record. 11-0 in the college football playoff for me last year against the money line, 8-3 against the spread. And I'm just the warm-up act. Steve Merrill of Wager Talk is our ace in the hole, show stopper. 7 years with the Voice of College Football, over 30 years in the industry. Steve gives us analysis on all the big games, but you can't miss Steve's weekly under-the-radar pick. 28-12 against the spread the last 3 years. You also get picks from some of our top analysts here at the Voice of College Football, including Corey Bratta, Matt Zemek, and Steve Dace. Check out those numbers. Become a YouTube or Patreon member for just $99 per month. Go to the main channel on YouTube, click join, and then select a betting tier. Do the same thing on Patreon. Make 2025 a winner now.